Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. Welcome to a very special Marvel Movie Talk. Very excited to be joined by Wordburglar himself, aka Bergie. Wordburglar, first of all, thank you for being here on Marvel Movie Talk today. And for our visual audience who can see this right now, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out that you, of course, are up there in the Great White North. So, of course, you're representing with an Alpha Flight shirt, and I much appreciate that.
Good call, yeah, and little John Byrne never hurts the eyes, is what I think. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here from Weapon Alpha.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I want to let everybody know about your Kickstarter, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I have a few different backgrounds I could use, and I felt like I had to go with the spinner rack because obviously you don't just have the song Spinner Rack. I guess the EP is called Spinner Rack. So for people that maybe are hearing about you for the first time, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I love the Spinner Rack. I definitely saw that. I'm Wordburglar. I've been reading comics and rapping about comics since I could read comics, pretty much. I'm an independent underground rapper and comic book creator. I started making mixtapes and zines when I was in like junior high, and then I just never stopped. And my songs have always been about the stuff that I love. And I get pretty nerdy about stuff, and I love the obscure, deep cuts. I always liked West Coast Avengers more than the regular Avengers. I always preferred Alpha Flight to the X-Men. Stuff like that. I guess it's not even that obscure now. We're living in a time where grandma knows who Thanos is, right? Or Ego the Living Planet is on a big screen.
But I don't know. I mean, I think Puck and Snowbird aren't household names, but they should be, by the way.
Yeah.
And I fully believe that we will get Alpha Flight at some point, as long as they keep doing enough phases. I think it would work best as a TV show. I think it would be fantastic. We have a few people in the chat I want to shout out. Our great friend Daniel Drew, who is always here for almost every episode when he can make it. He needs to get a few spinner racks. Yeah, when you can get a spinner rack, it is a great way to present things. And our fearless leader, Jonathan London, says, love you, Sean. Hell yeah, he's back to Geekscape after showing up in 2007.
Yeah. Wow, that's first appearance, I guess. It's on the back of my Marvel trading card.
And that episode of Geekscape needs to be bag boarded and sent off to CGC for grading. I have that episode in an 8.5. That was the best I could find.
Nice.
It's still going to get a good grading.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought was interesting, when you and I were trading messages, you also worked in a couple of very well-known comic book shops in Canada. So talk a little bit about sort of that, and if it's like the comic book version of the great book and film High Fidelity.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. I mean, I was related to that movie in that exact way. I started working at Strange Adventures in Halifax, Nova Scotia, on the east coast of Canada. Nova Scotia sadly never got any representation in Alpha Flight. I just need to add. We had Marina was from Newfoundland, but there was never a Nova Scotian. Very curious there.
Is it because Nova Scotia is that time zone that's like one past like New York and Toronto, and it's just too hard to coordinate with a superhero that's an hour ahead of everything?
Well, Newfoundland is like a half hour off sometimes, which is even weird.
That's even weirder.
I mean, it's all good. We notice these things, right? I think anybody who comes from sort of a smaller area always, you always notice that representation. Oh, they just said Nova Scotia in a movie. That was exciting.
Yeah, I grew up I've lived in Los Angeles for 20 some odd years now, but I grew up in a very small former resort town in upstate New York, about 45 miles northwest of Manhattan. And when they went to my town on an episode of The Sopranos, they went to Greenwood Lake, New York. I was like, that's where I'm from. It's crazy. You can like lose your mind. So
totally.
So talk a little bit about working in those shops, though. So in the first one was in Halifax, and where was the other shop you worked at?
Strange Adventures, and then I worked actually where I met Jonathan and the Geekscape back in those early days at Silver Snail. Comics in Toronto, and Silver Snail is one of the oldest North American comic shops. So they were around like in the late 70s till today. And there's been a few different locations for the shop, but I worked at the Queen West location, which was huge. Arguably their biggest store. It was two stories. I mean, a comparison would be like a Midtown Comics, if you're familiar, like obviously.
Oh yeah.
And we're, you know, it was the best working at those shops. You know, yes, you get the staff discount. That was great. But I kind of quickly became one of the comic book people. Like at Silver Snail especially, we had a lot of staff and people specialized in like Pokemon cards or Dungeons and Dragons, et cetera, et cetera. And I was one of the people who worked in the comic section, which meant I had to keep up on everything. So Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, coming, or not Crisis, Infinite Crisis, the later series.
The later one.
I wasn't there in 86 or whatever the original Crisis came out. I was there in like 2006. What year was Infinite Crisis? I can't even remember now. But yeah, so that era, I'd be, you know, just reading everything up to date on every week. I'd be stocking the shelves. You know, I always tell people, like, I remember when Walking Dead #1 came out. And I had been a Kirkman fan. I loved his Super Patriot miniseries that he did, and I got exposed to that because I read Savage Dragon, yada, yada, yada. I loved Invincible, but Walking Dead #1 came out, and I remember stocking the shelves, and I would read the new comics on my lunch break on a Wednesday. And then, you know, I'd take a few, you know, I'd buy the ones that I wanted, you know, from my pull list, but I didn't buy every issue. And I remember reading Walking Dead #1 and reading it on my lunch break and thinking, it's just kind of like a 28 Days Later ripoff. And I put it back on the shelf. And then, of course, I grew to love it. And I read it every month as it came out. But I don't have regrets, but I do think of that time. I'm like, oh, man, like I put out issue 1 of this comic, which became so huge. And I just I could have picked it up for $2 or whatever at the time with my staff discount. So that, I mean, but then retail is just great. Yeah, talking to customers. I never needed to go online to talk about comics or anything because it was my life all day, every day, hearing people's opinions. I'd have to see movies that weekend. If you didn't go see Iron Man opening night or like the preview night, you'd have 100 people spoil it for you on Saturday afternoon, right? When you're working in the shop. So that was something, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, last year at San Diego Comic-Con, I knew so many people that hadn't had a chance to see Deadpool and Wolverine yet because it came out that weekend. And this year, we're going to run into the same thing. Fantastic Four comes out that weekend. Daniel Drew, who is basically our one-man encyclopedia for people who remember those. Infinite Crisis was 2005 to 2006. So you said 2006, so we're going to give you credit.
Okay, I was on there. All right. I didn't know I was getting, you know, I was up for no prizes here.
Yeah. Oh, I wish. I wish I had ever gotten a no prize.
Yes.
And we always like to say hi. Cam Egan is there checking in from the Chicagoland area.
Shout out. The real challenge is naming all the OMAC appearances because I remember there were like Infinite Crisis tie-in issues and like 52. All these tie-in issues would be coming out of stuff. And then be like, is it really a tie-in because an OMAC flew through the background? It's like, Now I know this is the Marvel sort.
No, it's fine. And the biggest difference is that when it comes to comics, I almost exclusively read Marvel. So my background is more in that world. But we do a show on this channel called Geekscape Book Club, and the idea for it was there were all these great runs, these great series, these great arcs that I had never read, and people would be shocked that like I had never read Batman Year One, but it was like, well, I haven't read The Dark Knight. I hadn't read it. You know, we've been doing it for a few years now. It was like I hadn't read any of it because as a kid, I don't know, I just dug in and I'm like, well, I'm a Marvel kid, and you know, 60 cents for comics in those days, you know, I could get a lot of them, but I couldn't get from what I considered to be both publishers. But we have tremendous respect and appreciation for DC. I just don't know as much. But when it comes to the movies, we have a little bit more knowledge for me, but we always appreciate it. And, you know, one of the sort of the earliest version before I did that, started doing the Geekscape Book Club, my friend Jeff Winstead, who is a creator in his own right, we basically did like a book exchange. He's like, I can't believe you've never read Crisis on Infinite Earth. So he sent me the trade paperback, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Yeah, I knew it was good. I should read it. And then I sent him my favorite, which is not on the same grand scale, but Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, the 6-issue miniseries. That continues to be my favorite. And shout out, Chris Claremont is currently doing Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, a sort of a revisiting of that. Daniel Drew said they better have a more organized movie screening at San Diego Comic-Con this year. And I hope I can get in unlike last year. But he did buy a movie ticket for Monday, July 28th of FF near his hotel. So I like that. Even before he gets on the plane, he is going to see the movie. So good for you.
Oh yeah, FF looks so good. And you know, speaking of John Byrne, that's one of my favorite runs of Fantastic Four. The John Byrne run, obviously, that was just epic. And then, you know, the Hickman run, like there's been so many great eras of FF. The Ringo stuff was really good. I enjoyed a lot of that too. And actually, Dwayne McDuffie did a really cool run on Fantastic Four that was pretty cool and a bit random. And you know, all that other stuff when they did with like when Spider-Man and Wolverine and Ghost Rider were on the FF, like that era was fun. Like, yeah, look, we could talk Marvel all day. And I was thinking about what the other tie-in was around Infinite Crisis. It was that like Civil War was around that time too. Yeah. And Civil War, one thing working in the shops too, everybody wanted the tie-ins, but we didn't order as much of every issue, right?
Right.
Like you order tons of like the Captain America tie-in, of course, and like the Road to Civil War and all this stuff. But then do you get all the Thunderbolts? Like at the time, Thunderbolts was like, we would not order as many Thunderbolts as we would of the other one. And I remember, I think there was one Thunderbolts cover where Iron Man was shaking hands with Baron Zemo.
Oh, wow.
And I had it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. I remember when I got it, I was like, that's an interesting cover. And I didn't really think twice about it. But literally that day, a guy came in who was like, do you have the one where Iron Man is shaking hands with Baron Zemo? And I was like, I do. And I acknowledge and respect you because that's an interesting scene. And I don't know. It was just like, there's those tiny little things where you know you're with your people and people get it. And there's like a little nuance that most people, it was like, no big deal that Iron Man's shaking hands with Baron Zemo. It's like, well, actually, there's a bit of history there.
It goes back many decades. And,
deep cuts, man. Deep cuts.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously the big crossover events, you know, a lot of times they were designed so like, all right, let's try and boost the sales. You know, like the Mutant Massacre was something that happened when I was reading early on, really. It was in the first few years. And the way I remember it is I was buying all those books anyway. So it was fine. It was like years later when it started being like, oh, I don't know if I read, you know, like, yeah, I like X-Force, but I don't know about Cable's solo book, you know? So it's like, you got to pick up everything. And, you know, I mean, the recently departed Peter David would complain that he had this like arc for X Factor that was planned for years. And each year he'd have to stop right in the summer, pull away from his story and do whatever the tie-in was and then go back to it. And it was very disruptive. I don't know if it really translated into the sales that they wanted it to, but look, I understand putting the X-Men in your issue. When I was a kid, so I started reading comics, I was about 7, and I loved the X-Men, but I really loved Spider-Man from television. But the book that I got the most excited for, you want to talk about deep cuts, was Power Pack, because two brothers, two sisters. They're one of them was the same age I was, and they were all kind of in the same age range. And I'm like, this is like kids with powers. This is amazing. I tell you, WordBurglar, I cannot believe that there's still no movie, TV show, one-off like Disney Plus movie, and animated. There's nothing. They've never done anything with it. And I'm like, tell whatever story you want. You don't even have to tell a story from the comics, but it's like, it's got the built-in audience. Look, there's 4 kids with powers. We should check it out.
Yeah.
You know?
I think Alex Power may have joined Runaways for a certain run. There was a quick tie-in there. Really quick tying back to Civil War and to my comic. The cover of my comic is by Steve McNiven, who drew Civil War and, of course, Old Man Logan, and WORDBURGLAR RHYMES WITH COMICS. We got Steve McNiven on the cover, which I can't even believe. But I had found out, because I wanted to thank him, and I found out that he was hunting a Power Pack issue, and it was one of the Secret Wars tie-in issues. And for whatever reason, he couldn't find that back issue. So with the help of my buddy, Alex Kennedy, who lives on the West Coast, we tracked down that issue and I sent it to him as, you know, just like a nice little thank you, you know, for helping me out on the comic. And so that's my Power Pack, or a recent Power Pack experience.
Yeah, and if memory serves, that has the character Curse on the cover, and it's a Walt Simonson cover. The Secret
man, you know your stuff. This is great. Yeah.
I'm gonna cheat and look up the issue number. It's 18. I would have said a different number. So but I remember, I can visualize it.
Or was it Secret Wars 2? I think it
was Secret Wars
2.
Yeah, the Secret Wars 2.
Somebody's fact checking us. It was Secret Wars 2, guys. I know the Beyonder. Okay, relax. I'm there.
Daniel Drew is basically that guy, but he uses his powers for good. And the one pun in the chat was excited because Curse is not somebody you hear about very often.
Yeah.
You know, now that I've looked it up, I'm going to switch what I'm sharing. We'll talk about the Kickstarter in a moment, but this is the issue that we're talking about.
Yeah, this is great.
And so this is basically the Walt Simonson cover. I can't make the ad go away, but I would love it to. There it is. And of course, his wife Louise wrote that series, and the parents in Power Pack are basically Walt and Louise Simonson. If you see the dad, he's got the beard, and you know, so they're basically, these are their kids, you know, that they're raising. So and you know, I've been lucky enough to interview Chris Claremont a number of times. Somebody that I would love to chat with is Louise Simonson, just because of, you know, all those great runs that she was a part of, you know, New Mutants before the transition to X-Force and all of that. And so some very fond memories. And you know, I met the two of them at an in-store in I guess it would have been Nyack, New York. They must have lived somewhere in like Westchester or whatever. So they like came and they did it. I was like, I think at that point they were amongst the most famous people I'd ever met. So I was really excited. Klaus Janson did a signing.
Wow.
I have my Punisher #1, the ongoing monthly, I have signed by him. And you know, so when you live at least like adjacent to New York, you know, they'll send them like a limo and be like, all right, come out to this Holiday Inn in Wayne, New Jersey, and hang out. So anyway, so that there's all that kind of excitement, and you know, just trading messages with you, it was very apparent that we have some very common sort of background. And I want to talk to you about your career that people know you more from, but let's talk about WORDBURGLAR Rhymes with Comics, because I think that kind of informs what this is. So the Kickstarter actually hasn't launched yet. Am I correct?
Correct. It launches next week. June 30th is what we're on track for. So that's what we're looking at. So
okay.
Yeah. It'll run all through July. So hopefully whenever you hear this, you can check it out.
Yeah, exactly. We'll repost the link once the Kickstarter is live. So tell people,
you can pre-save it now. Sorry, I should just say, you can just drop your email on there, go to the Kickstarter page, just type in WORDBURGLAR on Kickstarter, and you can just add pre-saved, and you'll get notified as soon as it drops, so you can get that first day, get on board the first day launch.
It says right there, notify me on launch. You can just click on that. If you go there. So tell us a little bit about what this will be, and you know, what people will get if they back the Kickstarter.
Right on. So it's a full color 100-page graphic novel anthology. I've got 15 different artists from Marvel, DC, Image, Boom, IDW, and Scholastic. They're all working with me on this book to illustrate and present my songs the way that I always thought they should be seen, as comics. So a lot of my music, if you're not familiar with my music, I have a lot of storytelling songs, a lot of songs about characters, a lot of stuff steeped in geekiness, nerdiness, science fiction, fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, G.I. Joe. There's the Tauntaun, who's the Tauntaun who moves to Toronto, where I live. And, he loves it here. We've got a similar climate to Hoth. He's the only star camel who's friends with Mark Hamill. And
judging from his garb, I feel like a Tauntaun would be right at home at a Leafs game.
Exactly.
It's nice and cold in there, yeah.
Totally. He's got the Leafs jersey. He's got the Blue Jays hat on. He's got Raptors shorts on, too, for you basketball fans out there. So all of my songs, dabble into all my geeky loves from movies and video games and comics and stuff. And I always thought, it'd be so great, because when I'm making the songs, I think of them as comics. Like, I make my own comic books as well. Like, I do The Last Paper Route. I have one called Snake Horse Pizza. I've done tons of different, there it is. I've done tons of different comics, but I've never married my two loves of music and comics this way before, because I never felt I was like, I had a way to execute it at the level I wanted to do it. So around 2022, I was working on an album called Bergonomic, and I made a booklet that came with the CD that was 28 pages with art for every song and then the lyrics. And I thought, this is a really fun idea. You got art on one page, you got the lyrics on the other. And then I figured out how I was going to do the comic. So what I've done, I've scripted stories for my songs, but the only words on the comic are the lyrics. So it's narrated by the song. So essentially you can read and listen along. So you get the soundtrack when you get the graphic novel. That's one of the options. So you can get just the book if you want just the book, or you can get the book and a digital soundtrack. And then one of our stretch goals is a cassette tape. So you get the physical version of the soundtrack on the album. And this cover here, look at that. That's Steve McNiven. Steve penciled it. Dave Howlett inked it. Dave's an incredible indie artist. Oh my gosh, if you like John Byrne and George Perez, Mike Allred, Steve Ditko, and Kirby all in one, you gotta check out Dave's art. He's phenomenal. So Dave's a Canadian comic book creator who does The Makers and Disco Ripper and a ton of great stuff. Dave's got a whole bunch of art inside the book, but he inked Steve on the cover, and then James White did the colors. And James has done a lot of art. He's done package design for G.I. Joe action figures. He's done like Magic the Gathering, The Rocketeer, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I love his colors. He has this kind of like new wave, synthy, retro, modern, like bright, like grab you, jump off the spinner rack color style. And this combination of Steve, Dave, and Jim on the cover, it's just like, I mean, that alone, that's what I want in a cover. And it's, of course, a homage to Steranko that I'm sure many people will recognize. So, I wanted a cover that like screamed superhero, dynamic, awesome, action-packed comics, but also music. And I mean, like Steve just beyond nailed it here with this boombox exploding and crushing Wordburglar on the cover. My back's still sore from this happening, because if it rhymes, it's real, right? So
right, exactly. And Daniel Drew is saying that is great coloring indeed, like retro neon. And Kame Egan was commenting on one of the images that we showed, which I will scroll back to. And,
good eye. Yeah,
thank you. A lot of fun things that we see. And I won't go too fast. I'll let everybody kind of revisit what we scrolled through, which they can find if they visit the Kickstarter. And there was indeed these people taking a nap in the Tauntaun. Do they smell worse on the inside? According to Han Solo, they do. You thought they smelled bad on the outside. And I believe everything Han Solo tells me. So
well, look, Tauntaun, he doesn't like to brag, but when he's dead, you can use him as a sleeping bag.
Well, it's good. You know what? I'm glad he doesn't like to brag about that.
Yeah, and this is what you can expect in the comic. What
I love about doing these shows is having sort of the live chat. It's sort of what you're talking about, chatting with people there in the comic book shop. And Daniel Drew points out there was a Power Pack TV pilot that was shot in 1991. Now, I knew about it, but I never saw it. But this is the crazy thing. So it was made by New World Pictures, which owned Marvel at the time. Yeah. Music by Danny Elfman. And what he's saying that it actually aired on Fox Kids. I didn't realize that. And he's going to send me a link because, of course, it's on YouTube, because what isn't? So he's suggesting we do a special episode. I'll probably be watching this right after. And met Claremont, had him sign some X-Men books. I met him for the first time at the New York Con. They didn't even call it New York Comic Con at that point. And he there was signatures were free, but there was a limit. But I don't know. I brought I think we could get 10 signatures, but I brought like 40, and I was smart enough. I brought his novel called First Flight, and I had read it. And I was like, oh, so yeah, just sign however many. And he's like, well, you bought my book, so I'll sign all of these. So, that's like 13-year-old me trying to beat the system a little bit and getting some extra ones. Now, some would say that because those weren't witnessed and I don't have certificates, that the signatures aren't valid. I'm not selling those books anyway. I want to have them signed. And I met Dave Cockrum at a con closer to my house. So I have issues signed by both of them. I'm like, what am I looking for? Why would I sell that? Because I'm so excited to, have stuff like that. And, look, that was kind of the fun thing, sort of what you're talking about. The time frames are a little different. I'm a Secret Wars 1 guy from, that's when I started reading, but obviously the more recent Secret Wars and things. But, with me, it was like, well, if your friends didn't read comics, you had no one to talk to about them. So fortunately, I had made friends with people who read comics. And, when you started being able to go to the specialty stores and, the newsstand in my town, it was actually like a newspaper shop. They stopped selling comics and then they closed. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to get them. So I had to start doing a mail order. There was a company called Westfield Comics. And so every month I had to wait. So I'm sitting there, Sean, and I'm waiting for it. But there'd be that day where all my comics would come for the whole month. It's a little bit of overload, it's like it's the comic book version of binging a show. You're like, well, I have 30 books. I need to read all of them now,
Oh yeah, I fully remember that. And like being a kid too, like my dad took me to I used to go to the corner stores and find those spinner racks, in the song I have the spinner rack. If a store didn't have one, it was whack. Like I would only go to the corner stores or only want my parents to take me to stores that had spinner racks, right? Because you never knew what you were going to get. Such a grab bag. We could talk about spinner racks forever. And for the first comic shop subscription I had, same way. And I had like Avengers and Spider-Man and all this stuff, but I didn't get to the comic shop that often. I was pretty young. And I remember like my dad would like take me maybe once a month or something. And yeah, when I would get that big pile, I remember getting a giant chunk, and it was not the greatest Avengers crossover, Operation Galactic Storm.
I remember it. Well, I was going to say I remember it well, but let's just say I remember it.
It existed. Let's just say that. It happened. And I remember just getting, whoever worked at the comic shop was kind enough to include all the chapters. And I remember getting this fat pile of like the Quasar tie-in and all this stuff on top of my other like G.I. Joe and Amazing Spider-Man, Avengers, like whatever. And it was just like, it's almost like, this is like amazing, but I don't know where to start. And you just get like, and then also Operation Galactic Storm was one of those first examples I remember of like reading stuff and it's starting to feel like a bit drudgerous. Like, Look, I love Claremont and I don't mind all the words on the pages, but it's hard to read like 10 issues of Claremont in a row sometimes, because there's so much dialogue.
Well, yeah, if it was a month where, you were getting Uncanny X-Men, New Mutants, the Wolverine solo book, and, there'd be one-offs. There'd be X-Men Alpha Flight. Shout out to your friends. That is a great 2-issue series drawn by the great Paul Smith.
Oh, love Paul Smith.
Yeah, and then there was actually so there was X-Men Avengers, there was X-Men Fantastic Four, all these great series. And Mark Silvestri did X-Men Avengers. John Bogdanove did the Fantastic Four, which is great because then Franklin Richards looked the way he was supposed to because he was drawing him over in Power Pack. So yeah, I would be excited for those crossovers, but I tell you, if I was reading and the little asterisk refers to see whatever issue, I'm like, oh no, I didn't read that. I feel like I need to stop. How am I going to get that one? Because now I would just order it, or I could read it on my phone if I could read it on my Apple Watch if I needed to.
Oh man, you nailed it. That's something people don't understand now. Those little asterisks. Go read Incredible Hulk issue 402. Like, no, I don't have it.
Or what was worse than that? It would refer to like, Wolverine. Oh, I've met the Hulk before. See Incredible Hulk number 181, and I'm like, Well, no, I can't do that because even then it was hundreds of dollars.
I
So
can't
no, I
see it.
can't go check Incredible Hulk 181. Thanks, editor.
Oh
You know?
my gosh, that's amazing. That is so good, man. C181. Oh
But
my.
the part that you're talking about
I
is
would like to see it.
there's a point in time where it was just getting to be too much. It was partially the crossovers. I felt like some of the content I wasn't as excited about it. And, you know, I mean, kudos to the gang from Image going off and, you know, getting paid the way they wanted to. They should, you know, get what they pay what they feel that they're worth. Great talents, all of that. That's not the problem. But then the Marvel books suffered a little bit, especially when it's like, well, we don't have Todd McFarlane. Can you draw like him? And then it's like, well, not really. I said, can you draw like him? Sure. Yeah, I'll try. You know, so it was a lot of that, and it wasn't as excited. I know one of the last issues of Amazing Spider-Man I did buy was the first appearance of Carnage. So at least I, you know, got in, you know, that's not like your Walking Dead #1 story. I have that one, but I don't have the second appearance of Carnage probably. So, and the moment that I knew, I'm like, all right, look, I was older. I had a full-time job. I was busy. But when I had gotten it down to, I only read Uncanny X-Men and just X-Men. And then when I had, I guess, more than 24 comics sitting in a box, I had a full year's worth and I hadn't read them. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm not as interested in keeping up on this as I thought I was. And so that's when I kind of took a step back. And I stuck around after Claremont left. I read for years the Age of Apocalypse.
Yep,
So
that was a great series. Yeah, Age of Apocalypse was great. The Joe Mad stuff. It's funny you mentioned that in the Image. Obviously, like I remember that image. You know, the Image era when they left. But you know what I think the biggest casualty of Marvel was? Everybody always thinks, okay, well, X-Men suffered, Spidey suffered, whatever. I mean, Spidey continued, right? Like the David Michelinie and Mark Bagley came in, like these series X-Men survived. What I thought was the biggest travesty at Marvel at the time was Guardians of the Galaxy. When Jim Valentino left, I thought that series, because I was reading all those Marvel books at the time, Guardians was consistently, now I was like, I don't know how old I was, 7 or 8 or something at the time, maybe a bit older, maybe it was 9, 10. That Guardians run, the Valentino stuff, I don't care what anybody says. That is some of the most fun Marvel comics that they produced in all of the 90s. And just like every issue, like Valentino was really building up the Marvel universe in the future, true to like Kirby and Byrne and all their references back. Like if you love Marvel history, that era of Guardians was so good. And then Valentino, obviously, we know he left with Image and that was great. But wow, when like, I think it was issue maybe 26 or 27, around there, the late 20s, when was Valentino's last issue. I have never witnessed a comic plummet. And no offense to the creators who tried to take over after, but, you know, and Valentino had all these great stories planned. I remember reading an interview and he said he thought he was going to stay at Marvel just to continue writing. He wanted to continue this run. And I met him in person. I told him this. And I was like, look, Guardians was the best. And he tried to do like the Alliance at Image, which a lot of people forget about, which was a sci-fi comic early on. But I think he only got to maybe 4 or 5 issues of that run at Image while he was doing Shadowhawk. And it just never took off. And that was sort of him trying to do a Guardians type book at Image. But wow, I like to this day, I know Claremont's come back, you know, Byrne came back and did the Hidden Years. Creators have come back to Marvel to like finish stuff up. I would love Valentino to return to Marvel and do his Guardians, you know, much like the X-Men cartoon that came back, X-Men 97 to continue, like bring back Guardians 93 or whatever year that was.
Whatever year that would have been.
Yeah. Sorry, that's my rant.
Well, it's interesting because that was a book that I read, and Jim Valentino's art was, you know, a tremendous reason why you keep coming back to that book. And I remember when we got a Guardians of the Galaxy movie, I saw who's in it. I'm like, what? I don't know any of these characters except for Rocket. Rocket Raccoon was the only one I knew, and it was because he'd had a solo book. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, that was definitely in the era where it's like, okay, well, we'll have faith in Marvel, they'll figure it out. And obviously that's James Gunn. So all of that was tremendous. But I remember seeing the trailer and I'm like, I know Chris Pratt from Parks and Rec, and I know Zoe Saldana from Star Trek, but I'm like, I don't know who are they playing? What is this? And, it's some of, I think that it's a lot of people's favorite to rewatch would be Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that, as much as I love Endgame, I've seen it 4 times. I don't know if I want to watch it a 5th time, I guess if I want to kind of wallow in the first hour of it, maybe, if I feel like I need the opposite of a pick me up. I need a real bring me down. Let's watch the beginning of Endgame or the very end of Infinity War when Peter looks at Tony and he says, "Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good." I don't know if I can relive any of that stuff, but yeah, there was really kind of this moment in time where and again, I have to assess that I'm in my early 20s at this point. We're talking 1999, and I had a pretty busy job. I was a page at NBC in New York, so I worked all day, and that didn't help me keep up on television, let alone like, okay, let's find time to read comics. So I just kind of took a step back, and I've read a lot of stuff from the years after that, some of it very good. And I think that the advent of, you have like Marvel Unlimited, you have DC Universe Ultimate or Infinite, I forget what they changed the name of it to, where you're just like, oh, I want to read anything that they've ever published. Okay, great. Just type it in and you'll find it. Like that idea, when somebody was like, hey, what if we did iTunes for comic books? No, that's crazy. You can't do that. But then they did. And I love sometimes for the show I mentioned, Geekscape Book Club, we've read more recent Daredevil runs when the Echo miniseries was coming up. I'm like, let's read her being introduced in Daredevil because I don't know that character. And it's great to have an excuse, streaming stuff online makes for, well, I'm doing work now. Daddy has to read 10 Daredevil comics. And no, these aren't ones you can read because they have the little Marvel Knights logo or whatever the Extreme was.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about taking sort of this love for comics and pop culture and things, and how the idea of turning it into a career as Wordburglar, like when does that start? Is it just start kind of casually? What happens? Like, take us through the journey as you would.
Well, I have a rhyme, and I always joke, like, I put myself through rap school working at a comic store. So what are you surprised by my content for? Because I've always loved comics, and I've always loved making music. And I've always done both, but I never really thought, I'm going to just do this, like, professionally or whatever. It was just like for me and my friends. Like, my friends and I made our own little comics and photocopied them. I would make my mixtapes and trade them with kids at school. And I just always just rapped about what, like, I love hip hop. I have a deep love growing up on hip hop, and like the classic, like, 80s, 90s hip hop is like that's my heart. So I always loved like the original perspectives and the creatives and the storytelling and the wordplay and all the rhyming and the catchy beats. And all these artists were telling their experiences, right? Like Wu-Tang's an easy example because everybody knows, okay, Wu-Tang, they've incorporated all the kung fu flicks and everything into their music, into who they are. And, I loved Wu-Tang Clan. I love Public Enemy, all these amazing artists. And so for me, I was just like, well, what do I know? I mean, I know I can make a rhyme about Wood God. I can make a rhyme about Marvel Tales. I can make a rhyme about Nth Man, the Ultimate Ninja, and the Larry Hama comics, and Ninja Turtles, and Grimjack, and on and on and on, like your obscure comics, because this was my life that I was living every day. I had a paper route that I would spend my money, then I'd take all the money and buy comic books and CDs and records. And it was all like just my life and just nerdy stuff, video games, movies. Like I just love this stuff. So when I'm making rhymes, my love of making music, like that was just all I've done. So having songs about G.I. Joe or Final Fantasy or, Guardians of the Galaxy, the Jim Valentino era, like this is just the stuff that just I know. And that's just kind of what I make songs about. And I had no idea, like this whole, like, there was no such thing as nerdcore or any of that when I was just starting out, it was kind of like a happy accident when this whole nerdcore music movement evolved, and obviously like where we are today, like it's so great that like nerd culture and geek culture is like people can share it easier. Like you mentioned, you had to know somebody who read comics. And like you did, like not everybody at my school read comics. I knew all the kids who read comics at my school because we see each other. And like my best friend and I became friends because I had an Infinity Gauntlet t-shirt on, and he stopped me in the hallway one day and said, "Oh, Infinity Gauntlet." And he was basically like, "Nah, I didn't really like that comic. It was just like a Marvel cash grab, but you know, cool that you have the t-shirt." And then I was like, "Who is this guy like dissing Infinity Gauntlet?" But then I was like, "Wait a second. He knows what Infinity Gauntlet is. Like he knows who George Perez is." Like, and then it turned out, you know, we're best friends for life. I love that guy. He's my brother now. Shout out Alex. But like, that's like, you know, it's just been my life. And then I've just never stopped doing it. And the more I get to, you know, I just love to do this stuff. I get an idea for the Taranton or WORDBURGLAR, who's kind of like this D&D Conan the Barbarian, Masters of the Universe on acid kind of character. Or, you know, I don't want to go to Cobra La, which is about basically work sending you to a place you don't want to go to, for anyone who knows.
Yeah. Cobra la 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 la.
Exactly. The Vipers who worked at Cobra at the time, you think they want to get shipped off to this crazy mutant Himalayan, you know, torture mountain? I don't think so. Don't send me there. So that's sort of the genesis of a lot of my stuff, and or why Genesis was worse than Nintendo at the time, like bad. Like I have a song called Sega Was Bad because at the time there was a war between Nintendo and Genesis. You remember Genesis was kind of like the bad one. It was edgy. Right. People were naked. There was blood.
Yeah, I had the, you know, once I got the Nintendo Entertainment System, it wasn't like my parents were like, okay, and for your next birthday, you're going to get another. No, it was, you're going to have that one. Even Super Nintendo comes around. It's like, no, you have that one, you know? And so, yeah, you're not going to necessarily get the next thing. So we were talking about with music, sort of the way that sometimes, you know, you get the appreciation and, you know, obviously a different genre, but to me, there's this moment, the first time I'm listening to the first Weezer album, and, you know, Rivers Cuomo has the Buddy Holly glasses. Obviously, they have the song Buddy Holly. They're in a Happy Days video, but there's a lyric in a song called In the Garage, and he talks about Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler. And I'm like,
I know that song well. Yeah.
I'm like, this might be my new favorite band because of just the fact, and they talk about Ace Frehley and Peter Criss, and I was a huge Kiss fan. So, you know, it was like, they're checking all the boxes, and you're like, oh yeah, maybe it's okay. And it's so funny because, you know, the recent 21 Jump Street movie, the whole point was, no, the nerds are the cool kids. And obviously that's a movie, and the jocks are not the cool kids. And I was like, yeah, that's the exact opposite of the way I grew up, because it was like, you're talking about, like, you knew everybody at your school who liked comics, but it wasn't like, well, we're going to sit down at lunch and look at our comics together. No, it was like, where can we go where no one's going to see us and possibly stuff us into the locker, you know, to shout out some of the greatest content ever created by your country, The Lockers, and you can't do that on television. You know, we felt like we would get
reference.
Thank you. Yeah. You know, trying to explain to my kids during the Kids' Choice Awards the concept of the green slime is like, oh, I know what that used to look like. But anyway,
Alanis Morissette.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Getting her start there. So in any case, though, it was like, I think it's great because, you know, obviously a huge part of it is, yes, the MCU movies, but even the big, you know, DC movies that have come, you know, maybe not the current crop, but I'm very optimistic for the new Superman. I can't wait to see it. And I think that helps because you know, when the Batman movie came out in 1989, that was like, well, those guys are still nerds, but I did like Batman. So, you know, there's something to be said for that.
Oh, yeah. Killing Joke sales skyrocketed. Yeah. You know, I remember everywhere you went, Killing Joke and Dark Knight Returns, like, where you could get those. Those were like the earliest graphic novels that I remember seeing because of the popularity of the Batman movies. Sorry.
And the little bit of the video that we showed that you had done, even though it's your song, I don't want to actually play any of the song on here because YouTube's very particular about the fact that you own that song and I don't. But the drawings with words, you like so many visuals in that. I could have stopped that video like every 5 seconds. And you mentioned Nth Man, and I'm like, oh my god, I hadn't thought about Nth Man in forever. And I could tell you about the first 10 issues of every new universe series. And there's some of the worst comics I've ever read.
Mark Hazard, yes.
Yeah. Kickers Inc. is the worst idea. Spitfire, wasn't great. The Star brand was the best one, and that was John Romita Jr. And then John Byrne took over, and somehow that's like the one thing that still survives from the universe is the concept of the Star brand. But there was just so much of it. It was like so much to consume, and if somebody moved into my town and they liked comics, I remember a kid. His name was Justin. Wasn't my favorite kid to hang out with, but he liked comics. So I'm like, he's fine by me. You know what I mean? It was just like, it's like, if you know why you should be excited about, oh, this thing's coming out with a Todd McFarlane cover. Okay. If you know to be excited about that. And so I think that all the things that we're talking about, it's kind of what speaks to people who probably connect to not just the music that you've put out there, but also this idea that you're going to do the comic. I want to make sure we get back to this. So the Kickstarter, people can sign up for it now. It goes live June 30th. WORDBURGLAR Rhymes with Comics. And everybody can find out more. They just should they just Google it? What's the best way for everybody to find it?
Yeah, there's a link right at wordburglar.com.
Oh, great.
And the link is right there. Or just go to Kickstarter and type in WORDBURGLAR. You'll find me. Or just do a search for WORDBURGLAR Rhymes with Comics. And the title is because that's what I do and what the book is. So I thought it was pretty straightforward. And yeah, we've got 15 amazing artists. Mike Holmes, who illustrates Wings of Fire, which is a scholastic graphic novel. If you are a kid or know a kid between the ages of like 9 to like 17, you probably know the Wings of Fire graphic novels. Jason Lowe, who's at Marvel right now, doing amazing stuff on Werewolf by Night. We've got Troy Little, who does the Cult of the Lamb comic. Brenda Hickey, who's probably best known for an insane run on My Little Pony. Her book, her story in this is called, for my song, From Earth. And it's kind of like this Jetsons meets Futurama story, which is just next level awesomeness. Dave Howlett, who I already mentioned, you got to check out Dave. Go find his book, The Makers. You were just talking about the image creators. The Makers is essentially like, what if the creators of Image got kidnapped by aliens at San Diego Comic-Con and forced to create a new universe for them. And it's awesome, without spoiling anything.
No, I love that idea.
It's a great comic,
and oh my gosh, I would I definitely want to check that out. This is from a little bit earlier. The one pun: Maximum Carnage was an event, so there were comics, there were games, and there was a Green Jelly song.
And a video game too.
I forgot about that, and I remember Green Jelly quickly changed their name from Green Jello because it's a copywritten term, but that Three Little Pigs song that they had was huge for that one moment in time. And I think that this one's actually pretty funny from Sam Bibley. Closing my eyes and imagining that this guy, our friend WORDBURGLAR, is at the bottom of a well, and Christian Bladt is interviewing him while he's stuck down there. I guess because of the echo. So it's.
Oh, do I have an echo right now? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we've had the echo on, but
I'm so sorry, guys.
No, it was all right.
Do you still hear
it? We had talked about it at the beginning, and I thought it was like, okay, it's just probably his thing, so it's fine. Yeah, I thought you knew, and that's why I put that up.
No, I didn't.
Don't worry about it. No, it's fine. It's like it's like pass the mic. You've got the mic. I think it's. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I brought that up to just be fun. Daniel Drew says the music and comic fusion makes me think you should make a comic that you also do an audio version that's also a song. Like each micro issue is a song. That sounds like what this is, right?
Yeah. So all 15 songs in the comic, all 15 stories are the songs. So you get the soundtrack, you get the digital soundtrack when you get the graphic novel, and you can just put on the soundtrack and rhyme along and listen as you turn each page. So that's essentially what it is. And one of the stretch goals is a cassette tape. But yeah, the songs range from sci-fi, fantasy to comic book. I have a song called The Other Shop, which is about that other shop that, you know, if you needed to find that rare issue of that Secret Wars tie-in and power pack, but your regular comic shop didn't have it, but you have to go to the other shop, but you don't want to because they're kind of jerks there. The prices are bad and it smells, but you got to go there. That's what The Other Shop is all about.
Yeah, it's funny because that's not just from childhood. There's a few great comic book shops near where I live in Burbank, California. There's one that I prefer not to go to just because the people are, you know, they're not there to make small talk. They're not there to, it's not fun. Sometimes I have to go there because I can't find, or they didn't order enough. So then I go in and I'm like, well, this will be the time. And I'm like, nope, this is the same as every time I come in here. And it just reminds me. So I'm like, yep, here's the money. And I hope I don't see you again for a while. So yeah, believe me, I know exactly what you're talking about. But I'm too kind that I won't say which store it is. But there's one that I don't like. And there's others that, you know, people don't know exactly where I live, but let's just say I could walk to the one I don't like. Anyway, that's not the point. So I want everybody to check this out. And before we wind down and say goodbye, I did want to ask if there are that kind of stand out for you, maybe if it was a moment when you saw it or as you look back, what are, and they don't have to be the best, but what are a couple of your favorite, specifically keeping the Marvel theme, what are some of your favorite Marvel movies, whether they're MCU? I always talk about Spider-Man 2, the second Sam Raimi, and X-Men 2 are two of my favorites. Not technically MCU films, but as the multiverse expands, they're kind of getting to be MCU adjacent. What are a couple that you think of first and foremost, like, oh, these are like amongst my favorites?
You know, you mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I think because I had low expectations. I loved the first two, but the third one, when they dive into the story, the deep cut stuff about Rocket Raccoon, and I had that Mike Mignola Rocket Raccoon miniseries.
Yeah.
Where Rocket Raccoon there's like all these other animal characters in it, and then they appeared. They were, you know, talk about characters we least expect to ever see in a movie. Seeing the supporting cast of the Rocket Raccoon miniseries on screen in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was like, wow. And I've got, speaking of signed issues, I've got the first issue signed by Mignola of that run. And like, I didn't get him, he signed a Hellboy for me too, but I'm like, you got to sign this Rocket Raccoon comic. Guardians 3, you know, I actually all the Guardians, because Guardians 2 has Ego the Living Planet, which I still think is hilarious.
Well, it's not just that Ego's in it, but it's also Kurt Russell. So it's like Snake Plissken is Ego. Great, sign me up. I agree.
Yeah, it's so good, and like, there's a lot I love about the Marvel movies. You know, the Avengers, I'd always wished they had gone more with like a Clint Barton, like we were talking about the aforementioned West Coast Avengers, John Byrne era. Like, I always liked that Hawkeye. I always found his movie like representation was slightly different than the comics, but where I found other characters like Thor and Cap and Iron Man, like they took all the best parts and made a great version. I always thought Hawkeye was, no pun intended, a bit of a missed the mark a bit. The marksman missed the mark. Yeah, Spider-Man 2 was really great with Dr. Octopus. I mean, that is a fantastic movie.
It's just a tremendous performance by Alfred Molina. And what I'll say about both Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2, both times the studio's like, oh, wait, that made money? Okay, we'll give you a little bit more. And they're able to do more things with it. And they're a little bit more ambitious. I mean, the first X-Men movie is a lot of fun, but the fact that the culmination of the movie, the climax, happens in the gift shop at the Statue of Liberty, you're like, whew, not even like out in front of the pedestal. Like, okay, you don't want to put it on the crown of the Statue of Liberty, but it's like, it's in the gift shop. So yeah, those movies I thought were great. And for the MCU, it always goes back to Captain America, the First Avenger for me, because it's like, that's a movie you could show anybody. You're like, you don't like superheroes? It's okay. This is essentially a World War II movie that has a little bit of that in there. And obviously the performances are tremendous. And there were people in the chat talking about how, I guess tomorrow we're going to get our final trailer for the Fantastic Four. And you and I talked a little bit about that. I did grow up reading that John Byrne era, which was really ambitious. They shoot the Baxter building into space. They go back in time. And as with anybody who travels back in time, you have to decide whether or not it's a good idea to kill Hitler, you know? And I'm like maybe 9 years old, and I'm reading this, and it's crazy, you know? By the way, let alone I was also reading Daredevil Born Again at 9 years old, but that's neither here nor there.
They didn't know what we were reading off those racks, man.
No, and I'll reread these books sometimes. I just reread Daredevil Born Again for the Geekscape Book Club while the Netflix series was on, and I'm like, oh my God, I read this? I'm younger than my kid is now, and I read this. But I don't know, I guess that was part of it. So anyway, the roundabout there is excited for this FF movie. The expectations for me personally are very high. I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic, but I'm very excited that in the same month we're going to get that, and we're going to get Superman. And I like to feel, you know, I did dig in early, like I said, that I was always a Marvel guy, but when it comes to this, I want everything to be good. All right. I want everything I see. I even want Shazam 2 to be good. Unfortunately, it didn't deliver in that way, but I wanted it to be good. What are your thoughts as we look ahead towards Fantastic Four, which is like almost a month away now?
Oh man, I'm excited. I just switched up my sound.
Yep. That's how it should have sounded the whole time. Yeah.
I apologize to everybody in the chat. I had no idea that there was an echo going on. So
yeah.
Well, I hope you still got all the great banter that we were.
No, everything's been great. It's been a lot of fun. I was just like, all right. I mean, you know, maybe it's a hip hop thing because you and I mentioned it. I thought you could hear it, but
no, I can hear you in these, and I'm running through a new mixer setup. So, anyways, I'm glad this is better. My hopes, Fantastic Four, I got high hopes. I like that. Now I've been avoiding, I watched the first trailer, and I don't want any more spoilers. From what I saw, it looks like it's a period piece. Looks like it's set kind of in the 1960s of the Marvel U, which I'm totally into. Yeah, I mean, look, I've watched every Fantastic Four movie that has been made, and you know, I wouldn't say the bar is very high to beat them. But yeah, I'm into the casting. The look looks great.
Yeah.
I'm also, Superman looks phenomenal. I think we've got a big superhero summer about to happen. And I don't know, now that ever since you mentioned an Alpha Flight TV series, that's all I'm thinking about now.
I think its time has come, and you know, there are some great costumes there from sort of the initial. And you know, I mean, the footnote in the history of the Marvel universe is that Northstar was the first character to be openly out. He was, you know, and he had they had a wedding for him, you know, years later. But I always love the dynamic with him and his sister Aurora, because, you know, it's sort of like, what if the Wonder Twins from Super Friends were these really I believe they were French Canadian. I could be wrong, but they seemed to really be, you know, sort of these two crankiest people on a team, and I kind of love that idea. So yeah, I've always wanted to see, and just imagine CGI now. Sasquatch would look amazing. Like, you know, we really need to get him on the big screen at some point.
Well, yeah, and I think Canada's been in the news a lot lately with, you know, I don't like to get into politics or anything like that, but I feel like it could be a fun angle that they could play, because we are best friends, let's be honest.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So I feel like it's a Canadian show would probably be accepted, I think. Like, I think that's always a concern when you look at like the studios. They think, oh, do we want to do a whole series about a team set in Canada? Like, that was sort of what even with the comics, they were like, is the comic going to be a success? But it was a success. You didn't have to be from Canada, just like I didn't need to be from New York to enjoy Spider-Man. Like, these are great comics no matter what. And yeah, there was a recent Alpha Flight run that Ed Brisson worked on at Marvel that I thought was fantastic. And Ed's Canadian, the writer, and that's a really good run. Yeah, like a mini series for Alpha Flight, why not? I mean, I would have picked Alpha Flight over Inhumans. I know they had to do Inhumans because they didn't have the rights to X-Men and everything.
And that was unfortunate, because I like those characters, and I love Lockjaw. and Lockjaw shows up on my daughter's only 7, so she likes sort of the lower end. There's Spidey and His Amazing Friends is a show on Disney Junior.
Yep.
And Lockjaw's in there, and she loves Ms. Marvel because of that show. So I was like,
Yep.
all right, this is great. You know, you start building them young. You know what? She loved Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel so much. I actually took her to see the Marvels because I had seen it first. I'm like, all right, there's like one scene where I think she might be scared. But then I was like, oh yeah, there's all these kitty cats. So, you know, my daughter loved it. And that's all that matters when it comes to that movie, is that my daughter had a great time seeing it.
Yeah.
But I love those characters, and I would love to see everybody from Alpha Flight. And I appreciate getting to chat with you about all of this stuff. And I look forward to talking again sometime, hopefully before too long. So everybody can just go to wordburglar.com. They'll find the link. Go to Kickstarter, type in Word Burglar. So Monday, June 30th is when it starts, correct?
That's right. And it's going to run all of July. So thank you. And look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Like, I was looking forward to this, but I didn't know we were going to be talking about the new universe and Power Pack. This has been amazing, Christian. So
well,
thank you.
Here's the thing. It can be kind of an annoying habit sometimes. Like, my wife might roll her eyes sometimes. I do like to flex a little bit sometimes and show off some of the more minutia that I know. If you weren't holding up copies of Nth Men, I probably wouldn't have talked about Spitfire and the Troubleshooters, you know, but I felt like, yeah, so absolutely. And
dude, this is what I'm looking for. It's like, we're now with all the whole internet, I'm still looking for, we can talk about John Byrne's Fantastic Four. Yeah. What about Next Men? Well, how did you feel about that transition when he moved to Dark Horse for that series? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so this has been a total pleasure. So appreciate it. And shout out everybody who's been hanging with us.
And anybody who enjoys this show and checks out comics, I highly recommend that everybody checks out Rob Liefeld's podcast. That is in no way associated with their network. He does episodes on feuds. The Todd McFarlane, John Byrne is one of the favorite hours of anything I've ever listened to. Okay. So I do hope everybody checks that out. And I just want to get this thought in before we say goodbye. Sky the Magnanimous, I remember back in 2018 at Fox/Marvel, they were developing a live action film called Alpha Flight. Matthew Vaughn, who did X-Men First Class, directing and writing, it got canceled due to the merger. There was going to be that a Dr. Doom script that supposedly Noah Hawley wrote, who did Fargo and the TV series Fargo, and also Legion, which I thought was a brilliant realization of that character. So there's a lot of stuff that went by the wayside. And I hope we get all of those things. I do want to give a programming note for our audience. We're talking about June 30th, and I'll remind everybody that about the Kickstarter, because it'll be live by then. We'll be back with this show Monday, June 30th. We'll be talking about the first 3 episodes of Ironheart, which are dropping on Disney Plus today, as we're talking right now, at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. The first 3 episodes, and then the next week, the next 3 episodes. There's just 6. They're going through them very quickly, so we need a few days to be able to watch them. We'll be back on Monday, and we'll also be doing the Geekscape Book Club right afterwards, talking about Superman for All Seasons, which is an amazing Jeff Loeb, Tim Sale book. So everybody can check those things out. I assume wordburglar.com will get everybody to where they need to go. They can find the music. There's more fun videos that I could have shown, but I would have stopped it every 5 seconds to prove that I knew something. But this has been great getting to know you, and there is some other news that we'll talk about next week, but it seems like the Blade movie might happen. We'll have a new FF trailer. Yeah, so we have a lot of stuff we'll talk about then. Thanks again to everybody for joining us in the live chat. Sorry if I didn't get to all your comments, but as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!